Armenia Turkey relations are officially non-existent and have historically been hostile. Whilst Turkey recognized Armenia shortly after the latter proclaimed independence in September 1991, the two countries have failed to establish diplomatic relations. In 1993, Turkey reacted to the war in Nagorno-Karabakh by closing its border with Armenia out of support for Azerbaijan. In 2008-2009, the countries experienced a brief thaw in bilateral relations, and in October 2009 the sides signed the normalization protocols. However, the protocols were never ratified, and in the following year, the rapprochement came to a close. The protocols were formally annulled by Armenia in March 2018. In 1071, the Seljuk Turks defeated the Byzantine Empire and captured its emperor at the Battle of Manzikert. In the resulting chaos, the Turks easily overran much of the Byzantine Anatolia. Despite Byzantine reconquests and occasional Western incursions in the form of crusading armies, a series of Turkish states were established in Anatolia. These Turkic tribes came around the south end of the Caspian Sea for the most part, and hence absorbed and transmitted Islamic culture and civilization, in contrast to other Turks who, such as the Cumans, became partially westernized and Christianized. With some superiority in population and organization, regional power naturally came to rest in the hands of the Turkic-speaking population. Many Turkic people came into the region fleeing from the Mongol invasions, and others later came in as soldiers fighting in the ranks of Mongol armies. Turkic Islamized populations also absorbed large numbers of the older inhabitants of Asia Minor, including Greeks and Armenians, who went over to the Islamic religion and Turkic language, creating a frontier society. Armenian communities continued to flourish under relatively tolerant Ottoman rule for centuries, either as minority populations in urban areas or as exclusively Armenian towns in rural areas. In cities such as Istanbul and Izmir, Armenians played particularly important roles. An 1851 report in the New York Times, for instance, indicates that Armenians comprised nearly 1/4 of the population of Istanbul at that time, with over 200,000 residents. For a half-century leading up to World War I, the Armenian populations of Anatolia became increasingly politically active, and in turn endured increasingly more brutal persecution under Sultan Abdul Hamid II. As the Ottoman Empire declined, its political leadership either authorized or tolerated increasingly violent and reckless attacks on the Armenian population, attracting harsh criticism from various Western nations whose missionary communities in Anatolia witnessed several wide-scale massacres of Armenians. From 1894 to 1896, the Sultan ordered the deaths of up to 300,000 Armenians, resulting in at least 50,000 Armenian orphans. In the Hamidian massacres, which were later described by BBC correspondent Chris Morris in The New Turkey as a portent of the grim events of 1915, the concurrent and accumulated testimony of hundreds and thousands of intelligent people, Christian and Jew, Catholic and Protestant, European and American, made it conclusively certain that a massacre of innocents, unparalleled for ages, had been perpetrated in the Armenian provinces of Turkey. The New York Times, January 25, 1896. Following the Hamidian massacres, the seizure of the Ottoman Bank by Armenian revolutionaries later that year, apparently a naive plea for Western intervention on behalf of the Armenians of the Ottoman Empire, contributed to stoking Hamidian persecution of Armenians. Those who stormed the bank were eventually granted safe passage out of the empire, but the Armenian population found itself subject to intensified violence as the Sultan made no distinction between the revolutionaries who had stormed the bank and the Christian populations at large. The ensuing violence prompted condemnation from several heads of state, including American President Grover Cleveland, who condemned the bloody butchery in Anatolia, while it was unclear to what extent the violence against Armenians was governmentally organized. Cleveland's speech noted that strong evidence exists of actual complicity of Turkish soldiers in the work of destruction and robbery. In 1909, As the authority of the nascent Young Turk government splintered, Abdul Hamid II briefly regained his sultanate with a populist appeal to Islamism. 30,000 Armenians perished in the subsequent Adana massacre. The Armenian National Movement, also known as the Armenian Revolutionary Movement, was the Armenian national effort to re-establish an Armenian state in the historic Armenian homelands of Eastern Asia Minor and the Transcaucasus. The decline of the Ottoman Empire was in part the result and in part the cause of the rise of nationalism among various groups that made up the multi-ethnic and multi-religion empire. The 1877–1878 Russo-Turkish War, which resulted